Good morning. Raise your right hand. Do you affirm the testimony that you give before this trial shall be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you. Please proceed in the witness stand. You will just the height. State your name again for the record. Or your last name.
Ryan Kelly, Kelly.
Your Honor, for the record, we're calling Agent Kelly for limited purposes this morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Agent Kelly, could you please tell the jurors where you work?
I'm a special agent with the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED.
Okay. And what is your position at SLED?
I'm a senior special agent.
And in your position as a senior special agent, were you involved in the investigation into the deaths of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at some exhibits here. State's Exhibit 464.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell us what that is?
These are the buccal swabs of Philip Beach, Renee Beach, Robin Beach, and John Murdaugh.
And State's 465.
These are the buccal swabs of Ronald Freeman. Let's see.
466.
The buccal swab of Michael List.
467.
The buccal swab of Matthew Luce.
And 468.
It's a buccal swab, I'm trying to see. It's a buccal swab of Curtis Smith.
And Agent Kelly, who collected those buccal swabs?
I did.
Okay, and how did you collect them?
We have a process where we put on rubber gloves and we have Q-tips that are sealed. We break the packaging, unseal the Q-tip. We insert one Q-tip into the side of their cheek and we obtain a buccal swab sample. We then remove the Q-tip, seal it in an envelope, seal the envelope. We then take the second Q-tip, which is in the packet. We break the seal, insert it into the other cheek where we swab. That Q-tip is then secured into a sealed envelope, and then the two separate sealed envelopes are then placed into a third envelope where it's sealed and signed an initial on the seal.
And you did that with each of these buccal swabs?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to admit State's Exhibits 464, 465, 466, 467, and 468.
They are admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have no further questions for Senior Special Agent Kelly at this time.
Cross-examination.
No questions.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your next witness.
Rachel Wynn.
Good morning. Raise your right hand. Do you affirm that you give trial shall be the truth, so help
Bear with me, it'll straighten up eventually.
have to state your name again, please. Spell your last name.
Rachel Wynn, N-G-I-E-N. Good morning.
Wynn, could you please tell the jurors who you work for?
I work in the Law Enforcement Division, most commonly known as SLED.
And how long have you been at SLED?
I worked at SLED for approximately 8.5 years.
Could you pull the microphone a little closer to make me hear you or speak up a little? And what is your position at SLED?
Forensic scientist in the DNA casework department at the SLED laboratory.
What does that mean? A little bit more. Okay. So what does that mean? Tell us a little bit more about your job.
Like my job duties?
Yes.
So I am responsible for direct DNA analysis when requested by a DNA analyst What that is the beginning portion of the laboratory section component of DNA analysis. That involves DNA extraction as well as DNA quantitation. Extraction meaning to separate any possible DNA from a sample, such as a swab or a cutting. And quantitation would be to see how much, if any, is present in a sample. I'm also responsible for serology analysis as well as evidence processing. Serology analysis is body fluid identification. At SLED, we test for blood, semen, and saliva. Evidence processing would be to process items for possible touch DNA or ownership DNA. Touch DNA would be to retrieve any possible DNA on an item from handling it. Ownership DNA would be potentially retrieving any DNA from wearing an article of clothing. In addition to those types of analysis, I also issue reports on my findings when appropriate. I am able to technically and administratively review reports by other serologists, and then I provide courtroom testimony when required.
Now, you must have some kind of special training and education to be able to do these things. Can you tell us about that?
So I have 2 Bachelor's of Science degrees from the University of New Haven, one in forensic science and one in biology. Upon being employed within the DNA casework department, I underwent approximately a year-long training program under a court-qualified forensic serologist. During this time, I was able to observe as well as practice the different types of serological analysis as well as evidence processing. I was also taught how to issue reports based on any findings as well as technically and administratively review any reports issued by other serologists. I also was able to observe courtroom testimony. At the end of my training program, I then underwent a competency testing phase. This phase is to test my knowledge and abilities to perform these types of analysis independently. The competency testing phase was comprised of 4 elements: a written exam, an oral exam, a mock case to perform analysis on, as well as mock courtroom testimony. Once those 4 components were successfully completed, I was then deemed able to perform independent analysis on casework. In addition to my serology and evidence processing training, I also, as I mentioned, am trained in direct-to-DNA analysis. That was also an approximately year-long training program under a court-qualified DNA analyst. During that time, I was able to observe as well as practice the different types of protocols that are involved. At the end of that training program, once again, I went through a competency testing phase. It was comprised of the same 4 components, and I successfully completed all 4 components, and therefore I'm also able to perform independent analysis in the area of direct-to-DNA analysis.
Ma'am, I need you to speak into the mic a little better for my benefit, if not for the juror's benefit.
Okay, so, and Agent Wynn, have you testified in court before?
I have.
And how many times have you testified in court? Just
This will
estimate.
This will be my 19th time.
And have you been qualified as an expert when you've testified in prior proceedings?
I have been qualified as an expert.
As an expert in forensic serology?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to qualify Agent Wynn as an expert in forensic serology.
No objection, ma'am.
She is admitted as an expert in the field of forensic serology.
Okay, Agent Wynn, you were working in the serology department back in June of 2021?
I was.
Okay. And did you examine some items from evidence in the investigation of the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh?
I did.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 63 through 66. I'll have you take a look at these items for us. Are those items that you examined?
Yes, they are. I can identify these items because on the small manila envelopes contained within, I have written the unique case number that was assigned to this case at SLED, as well as each of their item numbers, my initials, and the date I opened the packaging.
Okay, and each of those items is a 300 blackout case.
Yes.
Okay, now what did you do with those items?
So when cartridge casings are submitted for touch DNA, which is what these were submitted for, we process them with a soaking method. So each cartridge case is placed within a tube, submerged within a solution, lightly shaken, and then it has to sit for at least 30 minutes. Once that 30 minutes is up, each individual cartridge case will then be removed from its tube. The solution will be placed poured into a filtration unit. The cartridge case will be dried. It will be labeled with the individual item number and then placed on a rack to further dry thoroughly. The solution that is placed within this filtration unit, the filtration unit looks like an hourglass. So there's a chamber on the top and a chamber on the bottom, and it's separated by a filter. So the liquid that is being poured in the top chamber will filter through the center, which has a filter which we call an MVAC collection. The goal is that if there's any DNA present within these cartridge casings, it will be trapped within the filter. And then the water goes to the bottom. The solution. And then the filter is set out to dry for at least 24 hours. Once the filter is dried, it is then cut, prepared for analysis. So it is cut in half, placed in a tube, labeled with the case number, the item number, and then it is forwarded for further analysis. And that collection from these items was identified as SLED item 7.1.
Agent Wynn, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 459. You could tell us, is that what you collected from those cases there?
Yes, so within here is, as I mentioned, SLED item 7.1. Once again, I recognize this because it has the unique case number, the container number, my name and date on the outside, as well as my name and date on a seal at the top.
And what did you say you did when you collected the, I guess, disc? Would you say?
So once the MVAC collection or the filter is dried, I will cut it in half and then half again. So each water will be placed within a tube for DNA analysis. It's labeled with the unique case number, the item number, and it is forwarded for further analysis.
So you forwarded that to DNA for more analysis?
That is correct.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move 459 into evidence.
Submit it.
All right. I'm going to show you tapes 33 and 34, which are fired shot shells. Did you perform any kind of testing on those two items?
Yes, so states 33 and states 34 are consistent with SLED item number 9 and 10, which were fired shot shells. These were also submitted to the laboratory for touch processing. These shot shells were swabbed for the touch collection. So basically I take 2 swabs, sterile swabs, and moisten one with the ionized water, and then I will rub it against the exterior of both of them and then leave them out to dry. Once the swabs are dried, I will then prepare them for DNA analysis, which involves just cutting a small portion from each swab, placing it within a tube, labeling it with the case number, the item number, and forwarding it for further analysis. For this, these swabs from the entire exterior of these 2 items were identified as item 10.1.
And I believe item 10.1 is also in State's Exhibit 459, which has been admitted. And you can open that if you need to.
Yes, this also contains item 10.1.
Which are the swabs from these shot shells here.
That is correct.
And then what did you do with those swabs once they were collected?
So they were prepared for DNA analysis and forwarded to the DNA section for further analysis.
Okay, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 18, which I believe is your item 17.
Yes, so I recognize this from the same process. I have the unique case number, the item number, my initials, and the date I opened. Item 17, which is State's Exhibit 18. I also have my initials and date from when I sealed this pouch.
And now what is that item?
Sleds item 17 are swabs collected from exterior doorknob of storage room door.
And what did you do with that item?
So I prepared these swabs for DNA analysis. Once again, I just cut a small portion from the swabs and forwarded it for further analysis.
States 259.
States 259 I do recognize for the same reason. I have written the case number, the item numbers, my initials, and the date that I opened these items. Found within States 259 are items 15 and 16. Item 15 are swabs from Camo Benelli 12 gauge shotgun receiver forward of the loading port, and swabs identified as item 16 are swabs collected from barrel of Camo Benelli 12 gauge shotgun.
Now, did you do any testing of those swabs?
Yes. Items 15 and 16 had blood requests on them, so these were tested with our presumptive blood test. A presumptive test only indicates the possible presence of a body fluid, and how I did that is because since these are swabs, I took a Sero swab, moistened it with deionized water, then rubbed it gently upon the swabs that are identified as these items. I then tested that test swab for the possible presence of blood. Closer.
This is a personal conversation.
I'm sorry.
You know, the prosecutor is behind you, and you're looking at her, and Mike is in front of you, and Attorney General, if you would move in a different direction, the witness will speak in a different direction, and I can understand what she's saying, or she can speak louder, or speak into the mic rather than speaking to you.
Yes, so if you could please continue explaining what the item is, please.
Yes, so I tested these presumptively for the presence of blood. So item 15, which were the swabs from the receiver forward of the loading port of the Camo Benelli 12 gauge shotgun, tested positive for the possible presence of blood. Item 16, swabs collected from barrel of Camo Benelli 12 gauge shotgun, tested negative for the possible presence of blood. Both sets of swabs were forwarded to the DNA section for further analysis.
Okay, so at this point, we don't know, we just know there's blood.
There's the possible presence of blood on item 15.
Objecting to the leading question.
Pardon?
Objecting to the leading question, Your Honor.
All right. Please do not lead the witness and restate the question.
And what did you say was present, or presumptively present on those items?
So item 15 was positive for the possible presence of blood. Item 16 was negative for the possible presence of blood.
And what did you do after you made those determinations?
So both of these sets of swabs were prepared for DNA analysis and forwarded to the DNA section for further testing.
going to hand you State's Exhibit 398. If you will take a look at those two items and tell the jury what those are.
State's Exhibit 398 are SLED items 22.4 and 22.5, which corresponds to item 22.5 is described as reddish-brown debris swabbed from the right side of item 22 receiver, and 22.5 is described as reddish-brown debris swabbed from the left side of the item 22 receiver above manufacturer information.
And what did you do with those items?
These items also had a blood request, so the same process as the previous items I just mentioned. I took a sterile swab, moistened it with deionized water, swabbed these swabs, and then with that test swab is what I tested for the presumptive blood test.
Could you please explain any results?
So both items 22.4 and 22.5 tested positive for the possible presence of blood.
And then what did you do with those items once you did the blood test?
These two sets of swabs were then prepared for DNA analysis and forwarded to the DNA section for further testing.
Now, there was a number of guns in this case that were processed. Is that right?
I believe so.
Okay. Could you tell us about the testing you did on State's Exhibit 89, your item 30, the Mossberg shotgun?
So when items of evidence are submitted to the SLED laboratory, sometimes they have multiple requests of different departments. In this case, item 30, a Mossberg shotgun, had 3 requests for the latent prints department, for the DNA department, as well as the firearms department. So we try to organize it so that no department's analysis conflicts with another department. In this case, this item was forwarded or was sent to the latent prints department for processing. The latent print examiners are trained in collection for touch DNA as well as swabbing up any stains that they may notice. So item 30 had a blood request on it. The latent print examiner, which took this item into their custody, requested that I come down as a second pair of eyes to visually examine this item for any possible staining. We located one stain, which I tested for the possible presence of blood, and the result was negative.
And after that, are you aware of any further processing on that Mossberg shotgun?
I am not. So I was there with the examiner, and it remained within that examiner's custody the entire time.
All right, let's move on to the other shotguns. We have a Browning shotgun, a Benelli Black Eagle 2 12-gauge shotgun, and the rifle, in addition to the guns we've already talked about. Can you kind of sum up how you analyzed those 3 different guns?
So those 3 different guns that you just mentioned were items 31, 32, and 33. They were done in the same manner as item 30, as I just mentioned. So they were within the custody of the latent print examiner. I went down to visualize it for any possible staining. The result for these 3 guns, however, was no apparent blood stains present.
And did you do anything else to check for blood at that point?
I did nothing further with these items.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 83. If you could take a look and tell us what items are contained in Exhibit 83.
May I open this?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 83 contains sled items 51
And Agent Wynn, you don't have to go through the sled item numbers.
through
Thank
60.
you. Yeah. And those items are what, though?
They are all swabs that were taken from the Chevy Suburban.
And can you tell us what kind of testing was done on those swabs?
So it appears that these swabs were collected because they were Blue Star positive, which to my understanding is a presumptive test used by the crime scene unit to indicate areas of possible blood staining. Since they were already presumptively tested, I used a confirmatory test to test these swabs for the presence of blood. So sled items 51 through 55 and 57 through 60 were all negative with that testing, which means there is no human blood identified. Item 56, which was swabs collected from steering wheel, had a positive result, which means blood was identified on this item.
And what kind of testing did you do to confirm that blood?
I used a confirmatory test called Hematrace.
And how does Hematrace work?
So Hematrace is a card test. It's similar to a pregnancy test or more relevant, a COVID test. You take a sample from the item of evidence, place it in a solution, and it should sit there for a while. And then once it has mixed in with the solution will then be placed on this card test, and then a result will be revealed. Results are read after 10 minutes.
Okay. And what are the potential results from that test? Just in general, from Hematrace testing.
There's a positive result or a negative result.
Okay. And in this case, what was the result on the steering wheel swab?
On the steering wheel swab, it was positive, which is a result of blood identified.
Okay. And then what did you do with that swab once you completed your test?
So item 56 was then prepared for DNA analysis and forwarded to the DNA section for further analysis.
Okay, I'm going to next show you items, or State's Exhibit, 251 and 252. Those were marked for identification only. Okay, can you tell us what are those items?
So State's Exhibit 251 corresponds to the left fingernail clippings and right fingernail clippings of Margaret Murdaugh. State's Exhibit 252 corresponds to the left fingernail clippings and right fingernail clippings of Paul Murdaugh.
Okay. So on State's 251, the fingernail clippings from Margaret Murdaugh, what, if anything, did you do to those items?
So State's Exhibit 251, what's received is clipping from her fingernails. So I will take a portion of the clippings that have been submitted, place it within a tube, and forward it to the DNA section for further analysis.
Okay, and when you say a portion of the clippings, does that mean you clip some more and send to DNA, or what does that mean?
So the literal fingernail clippings are what's being submitted within the envelope. So say there's 5 clippings. I will forward approximately 2 to 3 of what's been submitted, place it within the tube, and that's what will be forwarded for analysis.
And did you do the same process with State's Exhibit 252, the fingernail clippings from Paul Murdaugh?
Yes, State's Exhibit 252 will receive the same preparation for DNA analysis.
Your Honor, at this time the State would move Exhibits 251 and 252 into evidence.
No objection.
They're admitted.
All right, Agent Wynn, next if you could tell us a little about State's Exhibit 418, which was Alex Murdaugh's shirt. Could you describe how you first processed the shirt when it was initially received by the lab?
So the white shirt from Richard Murdaugh was submitted with a blood request. On June 9th of 2021, I processed this item for the possible presence of blood. So that entails I first visually examined the shirt for any areas that are consistent with the staining of blood. Then I tested these items that I have indicated with our phenolphthalein presumptive test for blood. 2 stains were tested. Both stains were positive for the possible presence of blood. 1 stain located at the exterior front bottom edge of white shirt was forwarded to the DNA section for further analysis. Afterward,
Just a second.
Okay.
And I'm going to hand you states 460. Now, you just said that stain was processed and sent to DNA. How did you process that? Did you send the whole shirt, or how did that work?
so the stain that I had located, I cut that stain from the shirt. I then prepared it for DNA analysis, which means I cut a small portion of that stain, placed it within the tube, labeled that tube, and forwarded the cutting as well as the portion that I have prepared to the DNA section for further analysis.
And that cutting is contained in states 460, is that correct?
That cutting is contained in states 460.
And what date did you perform that initial analysis?
On June 9th of 2021.
And I think you mentioned there was another stain also located on the shirt at that time?
Yes, 2 stains were presumptively tested.
Was that second stain cut on June the 8th?
It was not. It remained in the shirt and was identified with the presumptive test result.
Now, due to ongoing investigation, did you come back and examine that shirt again?
Yes, so afterwards, a request was relayed to me to go back to the shirt and retrieve that stain and forward it for DNA analysis.
Did you do any other testing this second time around?
So when I went to remove that second stain, I met with members of the crime scene unit, Lieutenant Wallace, as well as Special Agent Worley, and they processed the shirt with their LCV testing, which to my understanding is their presumptive test for blood.
And what was discovered during the LCV testing?
So after removing the second stain from the June 9th date that I processed it, 10 additional stains were identified from the LCV processing, which were cut from the shirt and prepared for DNA analysis and forwarded for further testing.
And I will show you states 461. Are those the additional cuttings from the shirt? And there are quite a few cuttings here.
Yes, so all the cuttings from the shirt are here.
Okay. Now, as far as you're concerned, did you process the shirt any further?
No, besides preparing these additional stains that were identified, nothing further was done.
And what did you do with those cuttings?
I cut a small portion from each of the stains that was indicated as being positive and forwarded it to the DNA section for further analysis.
All right, and State's Exhibit 418 is the defendant's shorts. How were those shorts processed in comparison to the